The gavel came down like a hammer blow in the suffocating Arizona heat. It wasn't land being sold in Redemption Gulch that day. It wasn't cattle. It was a woman's soul. Sterling Croft, a man with a cruel streak as wide as his ranch, laid down the challenge. His voice cut through the sweat and dust. He wagered his prize bull, a beast worth a fortune, against $100. He bet that the giant tracker, Kalen Blackwood, the man they called the Apache Ghost, couldn't spend a single night with the town's most untouchable woman, the beautiful, grieving widow Hayes. But this wasn't about a bull or a few dollars. This was a game of public shame. And when the widow finally took off her perfectly styled auburn wig that night, the truth that fell out would be more terrifying than any scandal. It would be a ghost story written in blood and bone. The air in the auction house was a foul mix of whiskey, desperation, and stale sweat. The year was 1878. The sun on the tin roof was turning the place into a pressure cooker. Colin Kai Blackwood stood near the back, a mountain of a man, 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that fought the seams of his vest. His hair was black as a mine shaft. His face was a hard mix of Irish and Apache, all sharp angles and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, missed nothing. He was a tracker, a man who moved with a predator's grace that didn't fit his size. He wasn't there to bid. He was there to collect a debt. Across the room, Sterling Croft preened like a rooster. Croft owned the biggest cattle operation in the territory, and he wore his power like an expensive suit. His face was flushed with booze and arrogance. There was bad blood between him and Kai. Years back, Kai had caught some of Croft's rustlers, but refused the bounty. He'd found out Croft had hired the men himself to ruin a smaller rancher. The public humiliation had stuck to Croft, and he'd never forgiven the tracker. The auction dragged on. Saddles, branding irons. Then the auctioneer, a nervous man named Finch, cleared his throat. Next, from the estate of the late Mr. Bartholomew Hayes, a silver-inlaid music box. A hush fell. A woman in black stepped out of the shadows. Mrs. Gwendolyn Hayes. She was the town mystery, arrived 2 years ago, married old man Hayes, and lived in near total seclusion. Since his death, 6 months prior, she was only seen in town for supplies, her face always hidden by a thick black veil. Today the veil was gone. She was younger than anyone guessed. Late 20s maybe, skin like porcelain, untouched by the brutal sun. Her eyes were a deep, sad green, but her hair, it was a perfect pile of auburn curls. Too perfect, almost like a doll's. She placed the music box on the block without a word and retreated back into the shadows. The bidding was slow. It was a luxury no one could afford. And that's when Sterling Croft saw his chance. He'd been trying to get her ranch, Whispering Creek, for months. It had the best water rights in the valley. He was squeezing the widow, calling in debts, making her life hell. This was just another turn of the screw. $100, Croft's voice boomed. The crowd gasped. The box was worth 40, at best. 100 for the box, Croft smirked, his eyes shifting from Gwendolyn to Kai. And I'll wager my prize Hereford bull against 100 of Blackwood's dollars that he can't prove he's man enough to warm the widow's bed tonight. The room exploded. It was a disgusting, brutal challenge. He was saying she was for sale. He was saying Kai, the half-breed, was just a savage for hire. Gwendolyn froze. A flush of red crept up her perfect white neck. Her hands clenched. She didn't look at Croft. She didn't look at the leering crowd. Her eyes, sharp as broken glass, shot straight to the back of the room, and they landed on Kalen Blackwood. Kai's face was a thundercloud. His slate-gray eyes turned to stone. Every part of him wanted to cross that room and shatter Croft's jaw. But that's what Croft wanted. See the savage lose control. Violence would get him hanged. Croft had him pinned. To refuse the bet was to look like a coward. In his line of work, that was a death sentence. To accept was to take part in the humiliation of a grieving woman. Now, Mr. Croft, this is hardly the place, the auctioneer stammered. It's a public wager, Croft bellowed. Perfectly legal. Well, Blackwood, are you man enough, or just a big shadow with nothing behind it? Kai's jaw was a knot of iron. The room held its breath. He could feel her eyes on him, not pleading, expecting. It was a challenge of its own, a question he didn't understand. Slowly, Kai reached into his vest. He didn't have $100. He had maybe 75 bucks to his name. Losing would ruin him. But some things once lost can't be bought back. His boots echoed on the floorboards as he walked forward. His shadow fell over Sterling Croft. He ignored him. His eyes were fixed on the widow. He emptied his leather purse onto the auction block. Crumpled bills and a few coins. It was $73. "This is all I have," Kai's voice rumbled through the room. "And my word, I accept the wager." Croft's face split into a grin. He'd won. He'd cornered the tracker and was about to destroy the widow. But then, Gwendolyn Hayes moved. She glided from the shadows, her green eyes lit with a cold fire. She walked to the block and placed her hand on the music box. "The terms are unacceptable," she said. Her voice was clear and steady, and it stunned the room into silence. "My bet is not part of any man's wager." She paused, letting it sink in. Then she turned her gaze to Kai. "However, Mr. Blackwood is a formidable-looking man. My ranch is isolated. I have been troubled by unwelcome visitors lately. Everyone knew Croft's men had been seen near her land. I will hire Mr. Blackwood as a guard. For the night," she announced. "He will stay at my house in my employ. What he does on my property as my employee is my business." She turned her icy gaze back to Sterling Croft. "If he is still there at sunup, you will deliver your prize bull to my ranch as payment for this public slander. If he leaves before dawn, I will pay you the $100 myself. Do we have an accord, Mr. Croft?" She had flipped the entire game on its head. She took his vile bet and turned it into a business contract. She wasn't a prize to be won. She was an employer hiring a guard. Croft was speechless. His victory had turned to ash in his mouth. He wanted her shamed, begging. Instead, she stood there, defiant. But the core of the bet remained. Kai at her ranch all night. "An accord!" Croft spat, his eyes promising revenge. Gwendolyn gave a curt nod. She looked at Kai, her expression impossible to read. "Mr. Blackwood, my buggy is outside. You will follow me." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the auction house, her head held high. Kai swept his $73 back into his purse. He gave Croft one last cold look, a promise. Then he followed the widow out into the blinding Arizona sun. The wager was set, but the rules had just completely changed. The ride to Whispering Creek Ranch was thick with silence. Gwendolyn Hayes handled the buggy with a quiet, steady competence. Kai followed on his buckskin stallion, keeping a respectful distance. The town and its judging eyes faded behind them, replaced by the empty gaze of the desert. Saguaro cacti stood like silent, watching giants. Kai watched the woman ahead of him. There was a core of steel under her black mourning dress, a fortress she had built around herself. Her move at the auction was brilliant, born from a sharp mind and pure desperation. She hadn't saved her reputation, not really. The whispers would follow her, but she had seized control of her own humiliation. They rode for an hour, turning onto a winding track that led into a shallow canyon. The air cooled. The ranch was nestled in a crook of the canyon, a well-built adobe house shaded by massive cottonwood trees. A creek, the lifeblood of the place, gurgled nearby. It was good land, defensible, well-watered. Kai saw instantly why Croft wanted it. It was the key to the whole valley. Gwendolyn stopped the buggy. She sat for a moment, as if gathering her strength. Kai dismounted. "You can water your horse at the trough, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice strained. The composure she'd shown was starting to crack. Kai nodded, leading his horse away. He worked with quiet efficiency, watching the house. She now stood on the porch, a lone black figure against the pale adobe, a creature of parlors and soft light, dropped into his savage land. When he finished, he walked to the house. The door was ajar, an invitation, but it felt like a summons. He stepped inside. The house was cool and dim. Heavy, dark furniture spoke of money. It was almost obsessively tidy. A single grim photograph of her late husband, Bartholomew Hayes, sat on the mantelpiece. Gwendolyn was standing with her back to him, pouring a glass of water. "Thank you for what you did, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice low. "Or rather, for what you are about to do." "I did nothing but accept a fool's bet," Kai rumbled, stepping fully inside. The house smelled of dried lavender. She turned. Her face was pale, the fire in her eyes replaced by a deep exhaustion. "You accepted an insult to your honor to spare me a portion of mine. That is not nothing." She took a sip of water. "I want to be clear about our arrangement. You hired a guard," he stated flatly. "I guard. At dawn, I collect a bull from Croft." A bitter smile touched her lips. "It's not that simple, is it? Croft won't be satisfied unless the whole town believes you fulfilled the original terms of his disgusting wager. He wants me seen as a fallen woman. He wants my name dragged through the mud so no one will help me when he finally forecloses on this ranch." She was right. The story told in the saloons tomorrow would be the one Croft wanted. "My husband," she continued, her gaze drifting to the photo, "was not a kind man, but he was proud. He borrowed heavily from Mr. Croft. The debt is substantial. Croft holds the note. This stunt at the auction was his way of isolating me, making sure no respectable person in town will associate with me." She looked straight at Kai. "I cannot lose this place, Mr. Blackwood. It is all I have." The idea of a sanctuary, a place worth defending, was foreign to him. His life was a series of dusty trails. "So what are you really asking of me?" he asked. Gwendolyn took a deep breath. "I am asking you to play a part. Croft will have someone watching the house tonight. They will need to see you enter. They will need to see you stay. In the morning, I want you to leave conspicuously. I want the story they tell to be convincing." The color rose in her cheeks. "You will take the master bedroom. It's at the front. The lamp will be lit. I will sleep in the guest room at the back. Your presence under this roof for one night is all I require." It was a performance, a lie to save her from a worse one. "And the price?" Kai asked. He was no one's hero for hire. "The price is the bull from Croft," she said. "It's worth over $500. "That's Croft's price," Kai corrected her. "I'm asking for yours." She looked surprised. She studied him, the sheer size of him, the intelligence in his watchful eyes. She had assumed he was a simple man of muscle. She was wrong. "I see," she said. She went to a locked writing desk, unlocked it with a key from a chain around her neck, and pulled out a ledger. "Bartholomew had debtors of his own," she explained. "I'm a woman alone. Collecting has been difficult." She tapped a name. "Jedediah Prentice. He runs a freighting company in Tucson. Owes the estate $200. He has ignored my letters." She looked up. "The bull from Croft is yours, but from me, I will sign over the Prentice debt to you. If you can collect it, the 200 is yours. That is my price." It was a shrewd offer. She was paying him with money she couldn't get herself. It was a gamble for him, but it was a real contract between them. It made the whole dirty business feel cleaner. "Agreed," Kai said. Relief washed over her face. "Good," she whispered. She tore the page from the ledger and signed it. As she handed it to him, their fingers brushed. Her skin was cool. His was rough and calloused. A strange current passed between them, an acknowledgement of the dangerous bargain they had just made. "Now," she said, her voice becoming formal again, "I will prepare some supper. Then, Mr. Blackwood, the performance will begin." They ate a simple meal of jackrabbit stew in the kitchen. The big dining room was left dark. The silence between them was heavy. "You're not from around here, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "I'm not from anywhere, Mrs. Hayes," he replied. "Everyone is from somewhere." He looked up, his gray eyes meeting hers. "Some places are better left behind." The finality in his tone shut that door, but it opened another one in her mind. She too had a place she had left behind, a past she kept under lock and key. After the meal, she lit a kerosene lamp. The flickering light cast long, dancing shadows. "It's time," she whispered, not looking at him. "The front bedroom. The windows face the road." Kai nodded. He understood. He walked into the master bedroom. It was dominated by a heavy four-poster bed. The room smelled faintly of the dead man, of bay rum and stale cigars. He went to the window. The moon was a pale sliver. Anyone watching the house would have a clear view of this window. His huge frame, silhouetted by the lamplight, would be impossible to miss. A moment later, Gwendolyn appeared in the doorway, holding another lamp. Her face was pale and tense. "I will be in the room at the end of the hall," she said formally. "If you require anything—" She trailed off. "I won't," he said. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." "Mrs. Hayes." She turned and left. He was alone in the dead man's room. He felt like a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. He stood by that window for a long, long time, a silent giant in the light for any spy in the dark to see. He knew Croft's man was out there, watching, crafting the story he would carry back to town. He thought of the woman down the hall, her courage, her quiet dignity. He'd agreed to this for money and pride. But standing here, he felt a grudging respect for her. He was guarding her home, but he was also guarding the last shredded pieces of her name. Hours crawled by. The house was dead silent. Kai didn't sleep. He sat in a chair by the window, rifle across his lap, senses on high alert. It was well past midnight when he heard it, a soft groan of a floorboard down the hall, a faint sigh, a sound of such deep sadness it seemed to hang in the air. She wasn't sleeping either. She was lying awake, a prisoner in her own home, while a stranger sat in her dead husband's bed to satisfy a rich man's cruel game. He thought of her hair, that perfect, unnatural auburn hair. In a land of bleaching sun and constant dust, such perfection was an anomaly. It was a mask, just like her grief, just like her manners. Everyone out here wore a mask. His was of quiet danger. Hers was of a respectable, heartbroken widow. He stared out into the endless, dark night and wondered what secrets her mask was really hiding. The first hint of dawn was a gray line on the horizon when Kai finally stood up. The night watch was over. Time for the final act. He opened the bedroom door, making sure it creaked. He walked down the hall, his boots deliberately heavy on the floor. He stopped at her door. It was slightly ajar. He could hear the soft, even sound of her breathing. She'd finally found sleep. He went to the kitchen and put coffee on to boil. The comforting, domestic smell filled the house, a strange contrast to the ugly reason he was here. He poured a cup and took it to the porch. He leaned against a post and watched the sun come up. He had done his part. He'd stayed the night. Soon he'd ride to town, claim his bull, and then head for Tucson to collect his $200. He'd be richer, his reputation safe. But as the sun washed the canyon in clean golden light, Kai Blackwood didn't feel like a winner. He felt a strange emptiness. He'd spent the night guarding her house, but he was leaving her more vulnerable than ever. The story of this night would brand her, isolate her. His presence, meant to be a shield, would be twisted into a weapon against her. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him that Sterling Croft was nowhere near finished with Gwendolyn Hayes. She found him on the porch nursing the cold coffee. She'd changed into a simple gray dress. Her face was scrubbed clean, and she looked younger, less strained. Her auburn hair was still perfectly in place. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice a little husky. "Mrs. Hayes." An awkward silence hung between them. The transaction was complete. "I trust your night was uneventful," she finally said. "It was quiet." He looked toward the road. "Whoever was watching saw the light. They saw me on the porch this morning. The story will be a good one." She flinched at the word story. "Yes, well, that was the goal." She hesitated. "Would you stay for breakfast, Mr. Blackwood? It's the least I can offer." He was about to say no, to leave this complicated place and its complicated woman behind. But he looked at the shadows under her eyes and saw a woman who was completely and utterly alone. Staying wasn't part of the deal. It was just a small act of decency. "I'd be obliged," he said. The kitchen felt different this morning, the tension replaced by a shared weariness. Gwendolyn made pancakes while Kai watched. He was struck again by her competence. She was no fragile flower. "You're educated," he said. It wasn't a question. Her speech was too precise for a rancher's wife. She looked up, surprised. "My father was a professor of literature in Boston." "Boston is a long way from here," he noted. A shadow crossed her face. "A different world. My family, we had a falling out. I came west to make a new life." And you found Bartholomew Hayes, Kai finished for her. I found a man who offered security, she corrected quietly. For a woman alone, out here, that is a powerful thing. Kai understood. He'd seen it 100 times. He looked at the grim photo on the mantel and imagined this intelligent woman shackled to that man. It was its own kind of prison. After breakfast, he knew he couldn't wait any longer. Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Hayes. I'll be on my way. They walked to the door. She leaned against the frame as he stepped onto the porch. Mr. Blackwood, she began, her voice hesitant. About last night, at the auction. I hope you do not think me. I think you're a survivor, Mrs. Hayes, he said, turning to face her. There's no shame in that. For the first time, a real smile touched her lips. It was small and quick, but it transformed her face, chasing away the sadness. Thank you. He nodded, about to turn away. But something made him pause. It was her hair. In the direct, harsh morning sun, he saw it. It didn't move right. The color was too flat. And right at the hairline near her temple was a tiny, almost invisible ridge, the edge of a wig. The realization hit him with a quiet, cold certainty. He was a tracker. He saw the details others missed. A faint boot print, a nervous twitch. This was just another detail. But why? Vanity seemed pointless out here. Was her real hair gray? Was she bald? His gaze lingered a half-second too long. He saw a flash of panic in her eyes before the mask of composure slammed back down. Her hand flew toward her head, instinctively. Kai gave no sign of what he'd seen. Good day to you, ma'am. He tipped his hat, strode to his horse, and mounted. He rode away from Whispering Creek Ranch without a backward glance. But the image of her on that porch, a lone woman guarding a house full of secrets, was burned into his mind. The wager was over. But the mystery of the widow Hayes had just begun, and Kalen Blackwood couldn't let a mystery go. Kai found Sterling Croft holding court in the saloon, already telling a dirty, exaggerated version of the night's events. When Kai walked in, the room went silent. He didn't say a word. He just stood in the doorway, his giant frame blocking the light, his stone-cold eyes locked on Croft. Blackwood, Croft boomed, with fake good cheer. Come to pay up? I hear the widow's hospitality is lacking. Kai walked to the bar, pulled out the contract for the Prentice debt, and looked at Croft. The bull, he said, his voice a low growl. My man will be at your ranch in an hour to collect it. Make sure it's the prize winner. I'll know if it isn't. Croft's face turned purple with rage. He'd lost, in front of everyone. He had to hand over his most valuable animal to the half-breed he hated. You got lucky, Blackwood, he snarled. Luck had nothing to do with it, Kai said. He turned to the rest of the saloon. Let it be known, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner. Mrs. Hayes is a woman of her word, and she's under my protection now. Any of Croft's men found near Whispering Creek will answer to me. It was a direct challenge, a declaration of war. Croft was seething, but Kai's reputation was a thing of legend. No one was dumb enough to test the threat. Kai turned and walked out, leaving a humiliated Sterling Croft stewing in his own rage. He should have ridden for Tucson right then. He had the contract. He had the bull. But he couldn't. The image of Gwendolyn Hayes on her porch, that flicker of fear in her eyes when he'd noticed her hair, it kept pulling him back. Why the wig? What was she hiding? He found himself riding not south to Tucson, but back north, toward the canyon. He told himself he was just checking to make sure Croft hadn't sent his men out there. He told himself he was just backing up the threat he'd made. He knew he was lying. He was being pulled back by an invisible thread, a need to solve the puzzle. He reached the ranch at dusk. He didn't ride up to the house. He tied his horse in a thicket and approached on foot, silent as a ghost. A single lamp glowed in the kitchen. He saw her silhouette moving inside. He could have left then, but he stayed hidden in the shadows of the barn, watching that small square of light in the vast darkness. An hour passed. The kitchen light went out. Then it reappeared in the front bedroom, the room he had used, the room with the clear view of the road. What was she doing? He had to know. He crept from the barn to the side of the house, staying deep in the shadows until he was right below the bedroom window. The curtains were thin. He could see her silhouette, She was standing in front of a mirror, her back to him. He watched as her hands went to her head. Slowly, she began to remove the pins from her hat and from the elaborate wig. Kai felt like he was violating something sacred. He should leave, but he couldn't move. She lifted the auburn wig from her head. Kai braced himself for scars, for baldness, for gray hair. He saw none of those things. As the wig came off, a cascade of the blackest hair he had ever seen tumbled down, a river of polished jet falling past her shoulders. It was the hair of his mother's people, Apache hair, but that wasn't what made his blood turn to ice. As she turned her head to place the wig on its stand, the lamplight hit the side of her neck, just behind her left ear. There, stark against her pale skin, was a faint, silvery scar. A scar he knew better than his own hand. A scar that had haunted his nightmares for 20 years. It was shaped like a lightning bolt. A memory ripped through him. A sun-drenched afternoon, 20 years ago. He was a boy of 10. She was a girl of 8, the chief's daughter, with eyes like new leaves and hair like a raven's wing. Her name was Tala, Little Hummingbird. They were climbing a forbidden rock face. He'd been showing off. He dislodged a stone. He shouted, but it was too late. It struck her behind the ear, slicing a tiny, jagged line. He remembered her blood, her tears, and the shame he felt. The shaman stitched it, but the scar remained. A tiny lightning bolt. Their secret. 2 years later, the soldiers came. The world burned, smoke and screams. He was knocked out and left for dead. When he woke, everyone was gone. Massacred. He had searched for Tala, for her family. He found only death. For 20 years, he believed she had died with all the others. He stared at the woman in the window, his mind shattering. Gwendolyn Hayes did not exist. The Boston professor's daughter was a lie. The prim widow was a ghost. The woman in that room, the woman he had made a dirty bet over, the woman he had just sworn to protect, was Tala. Kalen Blackwood, the man who was never surprised, leaned his head against the cold adobe wall and felt his entire world break apart. He didn't move for a long time, a statue of stone and shadow. The boy he had been and the man he'd become were at war inside him. Finally, his legs obeyed. He walked with the heavy steps of a man marching to meet his own ghost. He pushed open the unlatched front door and strode into the house. She heard him. She whirled around from the mirror, her long black hair flying, grabbing a shawl to cover it. Her eyes were wide with pure terror. "What are you doing here?" she cried, backing away. "How did you get in?" He didn't answer. His eyes were locked on her face, seeing the child he once knew buried beneath the years. "Tala," he whispered. The name was a key in a lock rusted shut for 2 decades. Her entire body went stiff. The terror was replaced by a shock so profound it stole her breath. "How do you know that name?" He took a step closer, pointing to the silvery mark behind her ear. "The sky spear," he said, his voice thick with memory. "I gave you that scar. I let the stone fall." Recognition dawned in her eyes, a fragile, impossible hope. "Kalen?" The name was a puff of air. "But you died. The soldiers. I saw you fall." "I was left for dead," he said, his voice raw. "When I woke up, everything was gone. I thought you were dead too." The strength rushed out of her legs. The carefully built walls of Gwendolyn Hayes crumbled into dust. She sank to the floor, a great shuddering sob tearing through her body. Kai knelt awkwardly in front of her as the story poured out. She'd been found hiding in the carnage by a cavalry captain. Instead of killing her, he'd taken her. Stripped of her name, she was called Odessa Vance and sent to a government school in Pennsylvania, a prison designed to kill the Indian, save the child. Her language was beaten out of her. Her culture was erased. Tala died there. A new person, a ghost forged in loneliness and fear, learned to survive. At 18, she ran. She drifted west, always hiding. She invented Gwendolyn Hayes, the disgraced professor's daughter from Boston, a story to shield her from a world that would destroy Odessa Vance. "Bartholomew Hayes was a cruel man," she whispered, "but he offered me his name and this ranch, this isolation, a place to finally stop running." The auburn wig was the last piece of the mask, the final act of burying the Apache girl from San Carlos. I saw you at the auction, she confessed, looking at him. Really looking at him for the first time. I knew it was you. I thought I was seeing a ghost come to haunt me. When Croft made that bet, I did the only thing I could think of to control it. Now he understood the strange challenge in her eyes that day. It had been a test, a desperate signal. He told her his story, being found by a trapper, learning to live between two worlds, belonging to neither. They sat there in the lamplight, two ghosts in a dead man's house, piecing together the broken shards of their past. The boy who gave the scar and the girl who wore it were gone. In their place were a hard, lonely man and a haunted, resilient woman. The last two survivors of a forgotten world. The bet, the auction, Croft. It all seems so small now. What do we do now, Kaylin? Tala asked, her voice small. Kai looked at her, at the last living piece of his history, and felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in 20 years. We stop running, he said, his voice filled with a conviction that surprised them both. This is your land now, and no one is going to take it from you. Dawn broke, and right on cue, Sterling Croft and two of his men rode into the yard. He had come to gloat, to see the broken widow he'd ruined. Instead, he found Tala standing on the porch beside Kai. Her long black hair was flowing free in the morning breeze. Her eyes were defiant. Croft's eyes widened, a sneer twisting his lips. Well, well, he mocked. Looks like old man Hayes married himself a squaw. But his insults fell flat. Tala stood her ground. They countered his threats of foreclosure with cold, hard facts from her late husband's own ledgers. Debts Croft himself owed for water and grazing rights. The money from the prize bull he'd lost was now their war chest. Enraged and outsmarted, Croft went for his gun. Kai was faster. His pistol was leveled before Croft's even cleared leather. A new wager, Croft. Kai's voice was deadly calm. Fists only. Right here. You win. The ranch is yours. Free and clear. I win. You forgive the debt and you never set foot in this valley again. Seeing a chance to win through brute force what he'd lost through cleverness, Croft accepted. The fight was not long, but it was brutal. Croft fought with rage. Kai fought with the focused power of a man defending the last piece of his past and their only hope for a future. He left Croft broken and gasping in the dust. Defeated in body, in pride, and in spirit, Croft dragged himself onto his horse and rode away, a man who had lost everything. On the porch, Kai and Tala watched him go. The cruel bet was over. A new unspoken wager, to build a life from the ashes of their past, had just begun. So ends the tale of Kaylin Blackwood and the woman they called the Widow Hayes, a story that started with a cruel bet and ended with two lost souls finding their way home. It just goes to show you, in the unforgiving heart of the Old West, sometimes the person you pretend to be is the only thing keeping you alive. But sometimes the ghosts of the past don't come back to haunt us. They come back to save us. Tala and Kai found in each other not just a shared history, but the promise of a future. But their fight was just the beginning. The world was still a dangerous place, and peace is a hard thing to hold on to. What other enemies would rise up to test them? If this story of secrets, survival, and justice in the untamed West got your heart pounding, be sure to smash that like button and share it with someone who loves a good twist. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we have countless more tales of grit, honor, and the hidden histories of the American frontier waiting to be told. You won't want to miss what happens next.